Welcome to GE Fun Facts Online. Today we are diving deep into a historical cold case that combines archaeology, geology, and the death of one of the most famous figures in human history. We are talking about the first emperor of Rome, Augustus Caesar, and the 2,000-year-old mystery of exactly where he died. For centuries, this location was a ghost story. We knew he built an empire from the ruins of a republic. We knew where he lived in Rome and where he was buried. But the villa where he took his final breath was lost to time, hidden by the very same force that preserved Pompeii. The answer, as it turns out, was hiding in plain sight, buried beneath volcanic ash on the wrong side of the mountain, waiting for a team from the University of Tokyo to uncover a specific, humble structure known as the Emperor's Furnace. To really understand the magnitude of this discovery, we have to look at the map of Roman memory. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in AD 79, it created a massive bias in our understanding of history. The wind that day blew south and southeast. It buried the resort towns of Pompeii and Herculaneum under meters of ash and pumice, freezing them in time. Because these sites were so well preserved, historians and archaeologists spent centuries obsessed with the southern coast. It became the playground of archaeological study. The assumption was that the wealthy Roman elite built their villas there, overlooking the sea. Conversely, the northern slopes of Vesuvius, specifically the area around the modern town of Somma Vesuviana, were largely ignored. The prevailing theory was that the north was a quiet, agricultural backwater. Scholars believed that because the wind blew south during the eruption, the north side was spared the total devastation seen at Pompeii. They assumed there was no deep burial, and therefore, nothing significant to find. But ancient texts told a different story. The historian Tacitus and the biographer Suetonius were both clear on one detail. Augustus Caesar died at Nola, in a family villa situated on the slopes of the mountain. But for a long time, Nola was interpreted as a broad region, and without physical evidence, the search went cold. That silence broke slightly in the 1930s. Excavators in the Starza della Regina district of Somma Vesuviana stumbled upon monumental walls and columns. It was a massive find, hinting that perhaps the north wasn't so quiet after all. But history intervened. The Second World War began, funding evaporated, and the site was reburied. It sat there for 70 years, treated as a footnote. It wasn't until 2002 that a team from the University of Tokyo, led by Professor Masanori Aoyagi, returned to the site with a singular goal: to determine what really lay beneath the northern slope. This is where the story gets complicated, and where the science of stratigraphy becomes crucial. When the Japanese team began digging, they found a villa. It was magnificent. It had grand halls, intricate stucco work, and a collection of marble statues that were museum quality. They found a statue of Dionysus, the god of wine, holding a panther cub. They found a beautiful statue of a woman in Greek dress. It was clearly a luxury estate, a powerhouse of agricultural production focused on wine. They dubbed it the Dionysiac Villa. However, there was a major chronological problem. When they analyzed the construction techniques and the pottery shards, the dates were wrong. This grand villa dated to the mid-2nd century AD. That is more than 100 years after Augustus died in AD 14. Even more confusing, it was built decades after the eruption of AD 79. This discovery was revolutionary in its own right because it proved that life returned to the slopes of Vesuvius much faster than anyone thought. The Romans didn't just abandon the area. They came back, cleared the ash, and built new palaces. But for the hunters of Augustus' lost villa, it was a dead end. You cannot die in a house built a century after your funeral. But archaeology is a game of depth. The team decided to dig deeper, cutting through the ornate floors of this 2nd century villa. Below the foundation, they hit a distinct layer of gray volcanic material. It was pumice. Chemical analysis confirmed it was the signature fallout from the AD 79 eruption. This proved that the 2nd century villa had been built directly on top of the volcanic debris. And underneath that debris, crushed by the weight of the eruption, lay the ruins of another, much older building. This lower villa was the ghost of the upper one. It was a massive structure dating back to the Augustan age, the late 1st century BC. The footprint was huge, consistent with an imperial estate. We aren't talking about a simple farmhouse here. We're talking about a complex with immense storage capacities for wine and oil, and decorative elements that survived the destruction. But identifying a building's age doesn't identify its owner. A wealthy senator or a rich merchant could have owned a villa of this size. To connect this pile of stones to the emperor, the archaeologists needed a smoking gun. They found it in the bathhouse. In the Roman world, a private bath was the ultimate status symbol. Public baths were common, but a private suite with a caldarium and tepidarium required immense resources. You needed wood for fuel, slaves to stoke the fires, and specialized engineering to maintain the heat. The archaeologists uncovered the kiln, the furnace designed to circulate hot air through the hypocaust system under the floor. This was the engine of luxury. The team took charcoal samples from this furnace and subjected them to radiocarbon dating. The results were incredibly precise, and they told a story of sudden silence. The wood had been burned in the early 1st century AD, but the most telling data point was when the burning stopped. The evidence indicated that the furnace fell into disuse around the same time, the early 1st century AD. It was not used in the decades leading up to the AD 79 eruption. While the rest of the villa showed signs of continued use, likely for storage or agriculture, the bathhouse had gone cold. This aligns chillingly well with the historical account of Augustus' death. The biographer Suetonius wrote that after the emperor died in AD 14 at his family's villa near Nola, the house was treated with religious reverence. It was consecrated. The bustle of daily life stopped. The fires of the bathhouse, which had been stoked to warm the frail bones of the 75-year-old ruler, were allowed to burn out, never to be lit again. The house essentially became a shrine. This is where the convergence of evidence makes the case almost undeniable. We have the location, the scale, and the timing, but there is more. The stratigraphy of the site shattered the myth that the north slope was spared. The team found layers of white pumice, followed by gray pumice, and then deadly pyroclastic surge deposits. They found walls blown down by the lateral force of the surge. The north side was hit just as hard as Pompeii. This explains why the older villa was buried and preserved, waiting for the 2nd century builders to construct their new home on top of the ruins. Furthermore, the statues found in the upper, newer villa offer a fascinating clue. The statues of Dionysus and the woman in Greek dress are stylistically dated to the early 1st century, the time of Augustus. Yet, they were found displayed in the 2nd century house. It is highly probable that these were heirlooms. When the later builders dug foundations for the new villa, they likely excavated these statues from the ruins of the Augustan villa below, and displayed them as a connection to the divine past. Perhaps the most compelling structural evidence is the transition of the site itself. Historical records state that after Augustus' death, his villa was converted into a shrine or temple to the imperial cult. The archaeological footprint suggests exactly this. It was a site that transitioned from a private residence to a place of memory, before eventually being buried by the volcano. So, with this archaeological setting in mind, we can reconstruct the final days of the Western world's most powerful man, with a vividness that was previously impossible. It is August AD 14. The heat in Rome is stifling. Augustus is old and frail. He leaves the capital, traveling south to the coast, hoping the sea air will help his health. He stops at Capri, then crosses to Naples. But he falls ill with dysentery. The journey back to Rome is too difficult, so he decides to stop at his family's estate near Nola, on the slopes of Vesuvius. We can imagine him there, at this villa in Somma Vesuviana. The air is cooler on the mountain. The slaves keep the furnace running to warm the bathwater, soothing his stomach cramps. He is attended by his wife, Livia. On the 19th of August, the end comes. He calls his friends and family to his bedside. He asks for a mirror to fix his hair and jaw. He asks them, "Have I played the part well?" Then applaud as I exit. He dies in the arms of Livia. And then, the fires in the furnace are extinguished. The villa is not sold. It is frozen in time. The amphorae remain in the warehouse. The site becomes a temple to the god Augustus. 65 years later, the mountain he had lived beneath woke up. Vesuvius buried the shrine under meters of ash, sealing the memory of the emperor in the earth. The discovery at Somma Vesuviana does more than just locate a deathbed. It rewrites the history of the disaster. It proves that the destruction of Vesuvius was total, wrapping around the cone and devastating the north, just as it did the south. It also tells a story of resilience, showing how the Romans returned to the site a century later to plant vines and build again on top of the history. The emperor's furnace is a rare find in archaeology. It is a utilitarian object, a simple heating system that tells a deeply human story. It connects the geological violence of a volcano with a political turning point of an empire. While we may never find a plaque that explicitly says Augustus died here, the convergence of radiocarbon dating, stratigraphy, and historical text is overwhelming. In the quiet town of Somma Vesuviana, far from the crowds of Pompeii, the ghost of Augustus Caesar has finally been found, resting above the furnace that once kept the cold at bay. Thank you for listening to Fun Facts Online.